What if the only man who could save you was the same man who had sworn never to feel anything again? The wind in Wyoming had teeth. It cut across the high mountain pass like a living thing, sharp enough to prick the skin and steal a person's breath. That same wind shaped the land and shaped the people who lived in the small frontier town of Red Hollow. It was a stubborn place, a line of weather-beaten buildings pressed against the granite bluffs as if they were hiding from the world. Ethan Cole lived above the town, tucked deep in the mountains, in a small cabin he had built with his own hands. He kept cattle, traps, and silence. He spoke little and lived alone because alone was safe. He carried grief like another layer of clothing, heavy and always present. His face showed long years under the sun, and his hands were scarred from a life spent fighting the land and everything on it. People said he was carved from stone. People said he felt nothing. Ethan preferred it that way. He had once been a man with a family, a future, and a heart that still opened. But the fire that had taken his wife and little boy had taken all of that too. That day had turned him into something else, something colder, a man who believed desire only brought pain. So Ethan lived with the mountains and hid from the world, hoping the world would hide from him too. Far from those mountains, a stagecoach rattled toward Red Hollow carrying a woman whose life had fallen apart in a different way. Her name was Alice Hart. She was 26. Soft-spoken, graceful, and deeply kind. She had been a schoolteacher in the East until a cruel lie destroyed her reputation. She defended a poor student who had been blamed unfairly, and the powerful men in her town turned against her. They painted her as improper, unfit, and troublesome. The truth didn't matter. Her career was gone. Her name was damaged, so she packed a single trunk, gathered what courage she had left, and headed west for Red Hollow, the only town offering a teaching job. She hoped the West would let her start over. She wanted simple things: a clean classroom, children eager to learn, a quiet life far from whispers. She didn't know Red Hollow had its own kind of cruelty waiting. The sky darkened as the stagecoach pushed through the narrow mountain path. Thick gray clouds rolled in fast, swallowing the sun. Silas, the old driver, squinted through the rising wind. "Feels like snow," he muttered. It wasn't just snow. Within minutes, the sky split open into a violent white storm. The wind screamed. Snow blasted sideways across the track so hard it hurt to look at. The horses fought forward, hooves slipping on the icy ground. Alice clung to the leather strap above her seat, her knuckles white, fear rising in her chest as the coach rocked and lurched. Every jolt sent her heart racing. She had heard stories of mountain storms, but nothing had warned her for this. Silas shouted something she couldn't hear. The coach hit a bump that felt like a boulder. Then came the sound that froze her blood, a sharp, deep crack. The left wheel shattered against a hidden rock, and the entire coach tilted toward the canyon's edge. Silas yelled. The horses screamed. Alice's head struck the window frame. Stars burst in her vision, and then everything went dark. Far up the trail, Ethan Cole was tightening the straps on a deer hide when snow began slashing sideways. He knew storms. He knew danger. This was no light flurry. This was a blizzard that could kill a man in minutes. He headed for home with urgency in his steps, leaning into the wind. Then he saw it, a dark shape in the swirling white. A coach tipped at a sickening angle, one wheel gone, the whole thing close to sliding into the canyon. Ethan didn't think. He didn't question. He pushed his horse forward through the storm. Silas lay in the snow, groaning in pain, his leg twisted wrong. Ethan knelt beside him and forced his flask into the man's hand. "Drink. Stay awake." "There's a woman inside," Silas rasped. Ethan nodded and went to the broken door. The storm had jammed it shut. He braced himself and shoved hard. The wood groaned and cracked open. There she was, a young woman curled on the floor, snow in her dark hair, a cut on her temple, her breathing soft but steady. Something in Ethan's chest tightened, an ache he hadn't felt in years. He lifted her gently. She was warm and fragile against his thick coat. He hadn't held another human being this close in years. The feeling shook him more than the storm. He mounted his horse, settling her in front of him. He wrapped his oilskin coat around her, pulling her close to shield her from the wind. "Easy now," he murmured to the horse, but the words were meant for her. The storm swallowed them as Ethan guided his horse toward the flickering light of his cabin. Snow stung his face. The cold bit into his bones. But he held her steady, keeping her warm with his own body, forcing the blizzard back with sheer will. When Alice woke, she was wrapped in a heavy wool blanket on a narrow cot. A fire crackled nearby. The small cabin was warm, simple, and clean. A tall man stood with his back to her, stirring something on the stove. When he turned, she saw the face of a man, shaped by hard years. Rough, quiet, eyes like a winter sky. "You're awake," he said. "Where am I?" she whispered. "My cabin. Storm took the coach off the trail. You'll be safe here till the pass clears." He handed her a cup of hot coffee. His big, scarred hands were gentle when he set it down. She noticed a cloth and basin nearby. He had cleaned the blood from her temple. "Thank you," she said softly. He didn't answer. He only nodded and turned away, as if he didn't know how to accept gratitude. The storm raged outside. Hours passed in silence. Ethan worked in quiet, repairing tools, tending the fire. Alice watched him, sensing both strength and deep sadness in the man who had saved her. That night he gave her the cot and slept on the floor near the hearth. A safe distance. A respectful distance. Alice lay awake listening to the wind and the strong, steady breathing of the stranger who had rescued her, alone with him in a cabin in the storm. She should have been afraid. Instead, for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. What happens when a quiet town decides who you are before they ever hear your side of the story? 2 days had passed since Ethan Cole carried Alice Hart down from the mountain, and Red Hollow had turned her rescue into a rumor faster than a spark catching dry grass. People gathered on porches and behind shop counters, whispering with raised brows and tight lips. By the time Alice stepped into the general store for the first time, every pair of eyes followed her like she carried a stain. She felt each stare like a weight on her shoulders. She had come west hoping for a new start, a place where past mistakes would wash away. Instead, the town she had hoped would welcome her had built walls around her faster than she could climb. Still, she kept her chin lifted. She began teaching in the small one-room schoolhouse, pouring all her hope into the children. Their eager faces helped her forget the coldness outside the door. But even there, the town found ways to reach her. Whispers drifted through open windows. Children repeated things they heard their parents say. "My mama says you slept in a man's cabin," one little girl blurted before flushing red. Alice kept her smile steady. "My dear, the storm was dangerous. Mr. Cole saved my life, and the driver's too." But the truth didn't matter to people who preferred lies. Judge Abner Pike, the man who ruled Red Hollow with a Bible in one hand and greed in the other, made sure of that. He was Red Hollow's loudest voice, and loud voices carry far. Alice didn't have to hear him speak to know he was stirring the pot. Every shift in the town's mood told her so. One Sunday, he proved it. After the service, the judge called a town meeting. Every pew filled. Even Ethan Cole, who preferred solitude, had come down the mountain for supplies and stepped inside the church when he sensed something was wrong. Alice sat alone in the front pew, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Judge Pike began his speech with honeyed words about morality and righteousness, but beneath the sweet tone was steel. "We must ask," he said, his voice echoing, "if the new schoolteacher is fit to teach our children." Quote, Alice felt her stomach twist. Pike didn't say her name. He didn't need to. Everyone looked at her. Ethan stood in the shadowed back corner, his face unreadable but his jaw set tight. He knew an ambush when he saw one. The judge painted her as a threat, a woman of questionable character who arrived under suspicious circumstances. He ended with a quiet, dangerous suggestion. She should resign. Silence filled the room. Shame burned hot in Alice's chest. She wanted to stand and defend herself, but her throat felt tight. These people didn't want truth. They wanted a target. Ethan clenched his fists. He wanted to step forward, to speak, to defend her, but his past stood in his way. Pain had taught him that getting close to anyone only ended in disaster, so he stayed still. When the meeting ended, people filed out with judgment in their eyes. The message was clear. They wanted her gone. For days afterward, things grew worse. Her boarding room was taken from her for the sake of propriety, and she was forced to move above the saloon, which only added fuel to the gossip. Store owners ignored her. Women turned their faces away. Still, she taught the children with steady hands and a soft voice, trying to believe goodness would win. But goodness alone wasn't enough in Red Hollow. One afternoon, while the children played outside, Tommy, a boy from the rough railroad camp, collapsed in her arms, burning with fever. His skin was blazing hot, his breath shallow. She raced him to the doctor, only to hear, "I won't go to that camp. Those people are filthy." Alice couldn't believe it. A child was suffering, and no one would lift a hand. So she lifted him herself. That evening, clutching Tommy tight inside her shawl, she walked into the rising wind toward the railroad camp. She hadn't gone half a mile when a horse and rider emerged from the dusk, Ethan Cole. His face was cut from stone, but his eyes widened the moment he saw Tommy limp in her arms. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "A storm's coming. The boy is sick. He needs his mother. You can't go there alone. They'll twist this against you." "Let them," she said. "He needs help." Quote, Ethan cursed under his breath. Not at her, but at the world that made her carry everything alone. "Give him here," he said. He lifted the boy in his arms with surprising gentleness. Alice climbed behind him, settling close, her hands gripping his coat as he guided the horse through the dark toward the camp. They delivered Tommy to his mother, gave him medicine, and slipped away before anyone could see Ethan helping them. When they reached town again, Ethan stopped the horse before the nearest lantern. "You should go the rest of the way on foot," he said quietly. "No one can see us together." Alice slid down, her legs trembling. "Thank you, Ethan." He met her eyes for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them, then rode into the night. The next morning, Alice found a wooden cross nailed to the schoolhouse door. A warning, a sentence, a demand that she leave. Her hands shook, but she pried the nails free. She refused to let them take the school from the children, but when she tried to open the door, she found a new padlock, one ordered by Judge Pike, for safety reasons. Quote, "They barred her from her own classroom, but she did not break. She gathered the children and led them away from the main street, through the cold morning air and into the abandoned church on the hill. Its windows were boarded. The air was icy, but she lit their spirits with warmth she did not feel. A blizzard blew in. The cold cut through the old walls. The children huddled together, shivering. Then, suddenly, the door burst open. Ethan Cole stood there, snow covering his coat, a sled behind him loaded with split wood and tools. He didn't say a word. He simply worked, fixing the door, clearing the chimney, starting a fire, giving them food. He didn't stay for praise. He slipped out into the storm as quietly as he had come. But something had changed. Because sometimes a man doesn't have to speak to show who he really is. What happens when a man who fears losing everything is finally given something worth fighting for? Ethan Cole tried to disappear back into his mountains, but the world he had spent years avoiding kept pulling him closer. And the reason had a pair of gentle hands and eyes that saw straight through the walls he had built. Alice Hart kept teaching in the old abandoned church, even as the cold crept in through the broken boards and the townsfolk kept their distance. But every day, more children came. Children from the railroad camp. Children from town. Children whose parents disagreed with Judge Pike's cruelty. Her little classroom of misfits grew into a sign of quiet rebellion. Red Hollow was changing, and Judge Pike could feel it slipping through his fingers. The tension broke one afternoon. A group of ranch hands loyal to Caleb Thorne rode up to the church, already drunk, already angry. They laughed and swaggered toward the children, mocking Alice, calling her names meant to hurt, one step too close, reaching for her with a smirk. Before he could touch her, a shadow moved. Ethan Cole. He grabbed the man by the collar and threw him into the snow with a single, controlled motion. Another cowboy charged. Ethan yanked him off his horse. One reached for a knife. Ethan snapped a branch from the ground and used it like a club, backing them away with the raw, fierce warning of a man who had nothing left to fear. When it was over, the cowboy scrambled away, bruised and humiliated. But Ethan paid a price. His hand was cut open, bleeding badly. Alice rushed to him and saw the deep gash. She pulled him inside the church, sat him on a pew, and cleaned the wound with gentle care. Her fingers moved steady and warm, wrapping his hand with clean white bandages. It was the first tenderness he had felt in years. He didn't speak, but something inside him broke loose. Pain, memory, longing. Her touch felt like hope. He had buried desire long ago, but now, sitting in a cold church lit by firelight, he felt it rise again, and it terrified him. Days later, Alice went to the county clerk's office searching for old documents for her lessons. She noticed something strange in the land records. Ethan's land, the mountain pass where his family was buried, had a new false claim filed beneath it, a forged survey, a fake company name, a signature she recognized. Judge Pike. Her heart dropped. This wasn't gossip anymore. It was a plan. Pike and Thorne weren't just trying to shame her. They were trying to steal the land Ethan had fought to protect. That night, she climbed the long trail to Ethan's cabin. Snowflakes drifted around her. Fear and urgency pushed her steps. He opened the door, surprised to see her. "I found something," she said, handing him the copied notes. "They're trying to take your land. They forged records. They used the law to cover their tracks." Ethan read the numbers and signatures. His face changed. The old pain, the old grief, the graves of his wife and son, everything crashed back at once. They weren't just stealing land. They were stealing memory. He looked at Alice, standing in the cold, her breath shaking. She had risked everything to bring him this truth. She had chosen him. He felt something settle in him like a final decision. "We're stopping them," he said, "together." They needed proof, real proof, the original ledger. So they did the unthinkable. They sneaked into the courthouse in the middle of the night. Ethan moved like a ghost. Alice held the lantern, her hands trembling but determined. They found the ledger, opened it to the right page, and took a photograph using the old flash powder camera Ethan had borrowed. The flash lit the room bright white. For a heart-stopping moment, they stood frozen, waiting for footsteps, shouts, anything. Nothing came. But outside, the weather changed. A storm rolled down the mountains. They tried to hurry back to Ethan's cabin, but the blizzard swallowed them whole. Snow blinded them. Wind shoved them off the trail. "We can't make it," Ethan shouted. "We need shelter." He dragged her toward an old trapper's shack, a tiny box of logs half buried in snow. Cold air seeped through every crack, but it was better than dying outside. Ethan lit a fire with numb fingers. They huddled near the flames, breath shaking. In the flicker of light, Alice finally whispered the question she had held for days. "Ethan, why do you live so alone?" His eyes lowered. Pain crossed his face. For a long time he said nothing. Then, finally, he spoke. "I had a wife, a son. I loved them more than anything. Bandits set my home on fire while I was away. When I came back, there was nothing left. And I told myself wanting anything again would only end the same way." He looked at his scarred hands, hands he hated. "I buried every part of myself that could feel. I buried my desire." Alice reached out, her gentle fingers touching his. She didn't flinch. She didn't pull back. "You're still here," she whispered. "You're still alive. You didn't lose your heart, Ethan. You just hid it." Her touch undid him. Slowly, he leaned in. She met him halfway. Their lips brushed, a soft, trembling kiss that tasted like fear and hope and new beginnings. A promise formed in the center of the storm. "I buried my desire," Ethan whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "Until your hands showed me I could choose you forever." Quote. Morning came, the storm passed, and now they had something stronger than winter defending them: truth. They walked into Red Hollow side by side, carrying the photograph. Alice stood on a crate and showed the whole town what Pike had done. Lies shattered in the street like broken glass. Pike tried to silence her, tried to turn the town against them, but fate struck harder. A fire broke out down the street, set by Pike's own men to cause chaos. The flames spread fast, devouring buildings. People panicked. Children screamed. Smoke choked the air. Then a voice cut through everything. Ethan Cole. He organized the bucket line. He dragged families from burning homes. He ran into a collapsing house to save little Tommy, carrying the boy out through fire and smoke while the whole town watched. Every lie burned away in that moment. And then Jonah Pike, Judge Pike's own son, collapsed in the street sobbing and confessed everything. The land theft, the lies, the arson, the plan to blame Ethan. Judge Pike tried to flee with Alice as a hostage, dragging her onto a horse and racing toward the mountain pass. Ethan followed with the fury of a man who had found something worth living for. He chased Pike to the old rope bridge. Snow whipped across the chasm. Pike lost control. Alice slipped from his grasp and fell. Ethan lunged. He grabbed her wrist, holding her over the abyss with every ounce of strength he had left. Inch by inch, he pulled her up until she was safe in his arms. Pike fell onto a snowy ledge below and survived long enough to be arrested by the U.S. Marshal, who arrived soon after. Justice finally came to Red Hollow. Caleb Thorne was jailed. Judge Pike was dragged away in chains. The town slowly began to heal. And Ethan and Alice? They chose each other openly. They married by the creek that ran down from the mountain pass. Children gathered. Friends watched. Ethan slipped a ring onto her finger, a simple iron band he forged from a railroad spike. Later, they built a new schoolhouse together, side by side. Alice filled it with laughter and learning. Ethan filled it with wood, stone, sweat, and devotion. In spring, he planted wildflowers at the graves of his first family, not from grief, but from peace. And 1 year later, he stood in the back of Alice's schoolroom, holding their baby daughter Sarah, sleeping gently in his arms. His scarred hands held her with tenderness once impossible. Alice came to him, smiled softly, and took his hand. The mountains outside glowed gold. The wind no longer carried sorrow. "Forever," she whispered. Ethan kissed her forehead, his voice steady and full. "I choose you. Always." Their love, born in a storm, strengthened in fire, rooted in truth, became the quiet heartbeat of Red Hollow, a promise that even the harshest land could grow something beautiful.